Critical legal studies is the precursor. Back in the 1970s, a group of legal scholars, mostly professors in law schools across the country, started getting together and asking questions about our legal system. And their composite concern was the inherent unfairness of some of the laws that we've got. They were saying, why do we have these laws? Who's affected by them? And so they started doing research on the subject and publishing it. And I read a lot of that, and most of it makes pretty good sense. There was one study that was done and published in 1983, and it was about murder trials in the state of Georgia over a 30-year period, and it was all about who ended up being executed. And when someone's tried for murder and they're found guilty in the state of Georgia, or at least this is the way it used to be, there had to be a determination as to whether or not the person was going to be executed or sent to prison for life. Big decision. And you know who got to make that decision? Juries did, not the judge. So, part of this study, and there's a lot of background research and so forth, what they found was that if you had a black a black defendant and a black victim, in only 1% of the cases, and there were thousands of these trials over a 30-year period, thousands of them, only 1% when you have black against black was the person sentenced to death. When it was a white assailant and a white defendant, it went up a little bit to 3%. When it was a white person murdering another white person, it jumped to 8%. But when it was a black defendant murdering a white person, it went to 28%, a huge difference. And you know, the object of the study was not to say, oh, well, this is why, but it's something that happens. There are differences in the outcomes of trials dependent upon the composition of the juries. And that was their primary conclusion. There were lots of other studies, and what they came to, suggestions were made to states and the federal government regarding changes or more observations that needed to be made in order to have a more fair legal system. In the 1990s, a new group, which was a subset of these people, formed, and they created something called critical race theory, which was a lot like critical legal studies, except that their focus was entirely on race. Now, in one area, and I have slides for this, but I'm sorry I can't share them, they were interested in cash bail. And some of you may have heard attorneys doing presentations on cash bail and the inherent unfairness of it. And the studies that I've seen would certainly support that. In fact, of all the people that can't make bail, the overwhelming portion of them are people of color. Now, why would that be? There are people out there, and we know many of them by groups, who would say, well, that's just the way those people are. They can't be trusted, they're born thieves, and all that sort of thing. The truth of the matter is, if you take a look at the mean income of white families, this was not mean income, it was net worth of families. White families, it was close to $200,000. Black was $25,000. Well, the point is, if you're told that you have to put up bail until your next trial, if you want to stay out of prison, if you can't afford the bail, you're going to jail, and you might be there for weeks or months until your trial comes up. And then on top of that, you may have a lawyer that says, look, I know you say that you're innocent, and I personally believe you, but I think you're going to get convicted when the trial comes. If you plead out to the DA, instead of going to prison for 8 years, you only go for 2 years. And so we have people who are innocent pleading guilty and going to prison because they get a shorter term and they don't believe they can get fair treatment. And I think that happens a lot. That's just one example of an unfair process whereby people who are on the bottom of the food chain, the ones who have the least amount of power and the least amount of money, are the ones that suffer for it. I've got a nice picture of a pyramid that you won't be able to see. At the top of that pyramid, the top of the pyramid are the mega rich. They are the billionaires, the people that have hundreds of billions of dollars. And then it works down to the people who are merely wealthy, only have millions. And then you go to professional people, and then skilled workers, and then the working poor, and then the indigent. The people of the least amount of power have least input into the legal process. The rules and regulations in the United States of America are designed to suit the people who already have everything. Everything. And it manifests itself in many different ways. Warren Buffett, the famous rich guy, owns all these companies and everything. A couple of years ago, he was famous for making this statement publicly that he paid less income tax than his secretary. Now, I don't think he meant total. I meant the rate. She paid a higher rate of her income tax than he paid for his. And it's because he's rich. He's got a whole room full of lawyers that figure out how to sneak through the loopholes. And then, of course, we have senators and congressmen which make up those loopholes for them, so they've got something to skinny through so that they end up paying less. Right? That's just part of the system. So you have people on the bottom who are going to jail, and maybe some deserve it and some don't, and people who are rich at the top that are making up the rules. I'll tell you this, you know, the part of Buffalo where the nasty murders just took place, okay? One of the things that separated that part of town from the rest of Buffalo was about 20 years ago or so, a huge road was put through, a 4-lane highway. You know what a mess a 4-lane highway makes? It's going to dirt and inconvenience and everything else. Well, they probably thought of putting it through a white neighborhood where the mayor lived, but that's never going to happen. The people who are going to be inconvenienced are the ones that have the least to say about it, and they have the least to begin with. And I think that's just a part of our country that's not the greatest. It's the way it is. Okay. So that's critical legal theory, dealt with those kinds of things. Critical race theory is based on two fundamental assumptions. One is that race is a social construct as opposed to a real genetic manifestation of anything. Have you heard of the Human Genome Project? It took 15 years or so for biologists and neuroscientists around the world to figure out how the DNA works in the human body to construct a person. Now, one of the things they found was that if you take two men of two different quote-unquote races and you compare their DNA, they're about 1/100th of 1% different. It's the same material. The fact of the matter is that genetically there's not much difference between someone from Southeast Africa and someone from Ireland or China. They might look different. Skin might be different color, different stature, different shape of eyes and all that sort of thing. But those are trivial. 82% of the genetic material that a baby gets from mommy and daddy goes to constructing the central nervous system. That's how complex that is. It takes 82% of the genetic material to explain to the body how they go about creating all the nerves and the brain and everything else. So, bottom line is, as far as people that are promoting critical race theory, is that there is only one race. All the other things that appear to make people different, they're not that different, but it's looks. And that's what counts if you make the wrong decision there. And the second part of it is that what makes people different beyond that are social constructs. If you take two babies born at the same time. One's Chinese, one's, let's say, white American from Cleveland, and you put them into a Chinese family and they raise them to birth. Someone would think that maybe the Chinese baby would learn Chinese faster. Nope. Every baby that's born is born with the capacity to learn any language in the world. Every language they're exposed to is the one that they will learn. And that's true for other forms of behavior. It's about the culture that you're born into and the rules that exist. It's not about race being like carrying kinds of monkeys or something like that. That's not the way we're made. At any rate, those are the two main concepts in critical race theory. They have nothing to do with teaching American history. And they sure have nothing to do with teaching little children that they should hate the color of their own skin or their classmates. I was a dean of education for 12 years at one point in my career, and I met a lot of teachers, and not a one of them ever thought like that. So, I truly believe that what we're seeing in state governments from governors and their subordinates, including in our state, they have set critical race theory up as a straw man. And if you know what a straw man is, in an argument, a straw man is a fake argument. It's something that you set up that you can easily destroy. It can't fight back at you. So, what do you do with critical race theory? You blame schools for something that doesn't even exist. As far as I'm concerned, the governor might as well be telling everybody that the schools are hiding zombies in the basement. It would have about the same. And we'll get rid of the zombies. We'll declare them illegal. And you'll go to jail if you feed the zombies. Well, critical race theory is used by teachers. It doesn't inform how history is going to be taught or anything else like that. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is, alluding to our alleged governor, that he's using that. I mean, we don't really know if he really believes it, but he's using it to hurt people. And I don't understand the motivation of something
Votes.
like that.
Votes. You tell the parents that their children are being mistreated by the schools, and you're going to fix it.
Well,
you're going to tell the schools they can't do this, and then they'll vote for me.
But none of us would do that.
None of you would.
But I guess I'm looking for the motivate. I get votes. What makes a person like that so hateful?
Power. The wish to be on the top.
It's a variation on the big lie.
Yeah.
You keep telling something to people long enough.
But I would never be motivated to do that.
Well,
So I guess the difference, I mean, and not that I'm any better than anybody else, but so my point is, and I get that he likes power and votes, but obviously that supersedes any sense of morality.
Yes. Now, the number one thing that everybody can do about this, and this at the school level and at school board meetings, is to force them to ask for facts. When the governor says they are teaching our children to hate each other, sir, could you tell me who's doing that? What are the schools? Where are the teachers? What materials are they using? What books are they making the kids read that would cause them to do this? I've got another chart of things that have been said by the Secretary of Education and others, and their claims. Nanny Diaz has done the same thing. Claims that the schools are doing things with critical race theory that are horrible and terrible and destroying America and all this kind of stuff. And never, ever any references. No evidence is presented. They just say it. They say it over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Isn't that the job of the free press?
Well, I've seen a lot in the press. I would have to say, generally speaking, does not support the governor on this. They ask questions, but parents are much more. Parents have got to start asking more questions. And if I'm going to come in and make a claim about you doing something wrong, am I not required to prove something?
Yes.
Or is everybody supposed to believe me just because I'm pointing a finger at you?
Yes.
Well, that's wrong. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that bothers me is that the people who object to the teaching, let's say, of the horrors of slavery, and depending on how it's presented, but they don't want children or anyone to, quote, feel bad about what happened. And I'm thinking, we need to feel bad about what happened.
Well, we need to feel bad on a certain level.
Yeah.
I don't think that anybody that's just born within the last 10 years or so should feel any guilt for something that was done by other people 150 years ago. You're supposed to feel guilty about things that you do or things that you failed to do that you should have done in your own life, which is quite a different thing. I see no problem with teaching children the horrors of Andersonville and all the kinds of things that have happened in our past. It's a part of reality. Understanding it is necessary. I mean, Native Americans were so badly treated. It's enough to make you cry. And we all need to know that. Our children need to know that for one reason, not to make them feel bad, so that they can make at least different mistakes and try harder to see that those bad things don't happen to other people. That's what we need to teach them. And my experience is most teachers feel that way and try to do that. I think they're getting a bad rap.
Sure.
Yes?
Where would be the logical place to start? I mean, it's not gonna, you go against the government. But isn't really at the Board of Education level, the decisions are made about textbooks and that sort of thing? Therefore, wouldn't that be the logical place, on a grassroots level, to start?
Oh, I think it should be everywhere. I think, well, for one thing, now we've got groups of people who have been organized to go to school board meetings, to stand up there and condemn what's going on, and they're the same people that want to have half the books in the library thrown away because they don't support a particular religious view or whatever it is. So, yeah, we need to have more people involved. Just, when I was starting my freshman year in college, the dean of men, whose staff goes in, got up and said, "Men, I need to tell you something very important. Half the secret of success in life is just showing up." And I thought it was stupid. But I have learned in the last 7 years that it was not stupid, and showing up is important. We need to have more parents that feel the way you do. Going to school board meetings, and when there's an opportunity to say something at the mic for 2 minutes, getting up there and saying something instead of having the people that are opposed to us lining up to go and say those bad things. Showing up wherever you can, wherever it makes sense to you. But I want to, you got a little handout for me. There's the first question on there. Could you read that first question out loud to us?
The United States has eradicated neither poverty nor racism.
Do you think that's true? I think it's true. I think you'd have to be a moron to say it was false. But that one sentence alone was to get enough to get one of the math books that have been submitted to the state thrown out. That one sentence, because the reviewer said it implied critical race theory. That makes no sense to me at all.
And where does it say that in that math book? I said, where does it say that in that math book?
Oh, I think it's a part of a lesson plan.
It's a Venn diagram of math.
Yeah.
Oh,
But why would you, and plus, there were like 5 reviewers for that book, and only one of them made mention of this, but it was used as an opportunity to throw a book out, and then maybe to say to parents, look, see here, we caught something bad, and we throw this book out. Good for us. This is my maternal grandmother's geography book. There's a chapter in here on races. Thank you.
We don't need that.
This book was first published in 1898. Redmond. It was used all through the Midwest, schools in Illinois for decades. The edition my grandmother had when she was in high school was done in 1916. And basically it lays out the races as being white, yellow, brown, black, and red. And I cannot read you some of the material that's in here because it's too unfair to the people it describes in terms of their physical appearance, their limited abilities, and all that sort of thing. I will read just the very last short paragraph that's on this unit. It says, most of the yellow race and part of the Malay race have reached some degree of civilization, but some people learn more rapidly than others, and the Caucasian race includes the most enlightened people in the world. Now, my grandmother believed this all her life. She was a good woman. When my parents got divorced, she and my grandfather took my sister and me in and raised us. And she was a great person, but she believed that she was a racist, and not a mean and ugly person, but it's what she believed, that other people that looked different from us were essentially inferior in a wide variety of ways. And this has been part of our culture that has been taught in one way or another. And that's something that we have to overcome. And that's what critical race theory would like to do. There is nothing evil in what these lawyers are trying to accomplish. And they're not trying to take over the schools or anything even remotely like that. So I guess that's it for me. What else? Any questions you have, I would love to entertain.
I'd like a definition of critical race theory.
Critical race theory is the belief that race is a social convention, a social construct that has nothing to do with genetics. God didn't make us all different, made us all the same actually, but because we've evolved in different places and created different cultures, our appearances and our beliefs and so forth are greatly different from each other. And that's what they're working on improving and spreading, and it's got nothing to do with public schools, what children should be learning. Yes?
And that there's actually more differences amongst the groups than the whole population.
Yeah, personality.
In each group.
Oh yeah,
There's
the
more
genetic differences within groups are much greater than across groups. Genetically, and I was amazed to read this, that women and men are like less than 2% different in terms of their genetic makeup. It's just, we're not as different as we would make out. The men and women are treated differently by our society with different roles and so forth, but that's because of the culture, not because of our genetic material. Yes, ma'am.
Well, historically, during slavery, the power system was built that the lighter skin, for blacks, the lighter skin got the better jobs. So this was done on purpose, and it was to separate the blacks so they wouldn't make plans to run away because they didn't trust. And then it spread out into the rest of society, so that poor whites actually found themselves agreeing to laws that they didn't benefit them, but they were white. So that gave them this feeling, and they were constantly reminded that they were white, and that lifted them up and made them feel better. So it is so in our roots.
And so I think what's going on now is the threat that white people have to maybe not have that sort of kind of insurance anymore.
What's going to happen?
There will be less white people. There will be less white people. That's a fact. There's more black, intermarriage and through everything. It's changing.
So will not be a majority.
It's a minority majority.
That is.
So they tell us.
It wouldn't make much difference to me.
No, I'm not saying it would. Okay.
Yes.
I gotta ask this question because every time I hear that, I don't know what they mean by critical race theory. What is it? What does it mean? I don't understand.
Hey, Sandy.
I don't understand what critical race theory even means. What is it? It's horrible according to what they're saying, but what's horrible? I don't get it. What is? It's like they throw out this term.
Yes.
What? I don't know. What is it? I still don't get it. You've talked and talked, but what is it? What is he trying to say when the governor says, "Oh, it's critical race theory," and you're making all these white people?
I can't speak for the governor.
What does it mean? It's so horrible. But
Critical
what is
race
it?
theory, if someone was, it's basically the two beliefs that I explained a few minutes ago. One, that there's not that much difference across what we commonly call races. We're all pretty much the same genetically, right? But you ask that of some people, they're going to say, oh, no, these races are all different. That's why these people are born thieves. You ever heard something like that? Born thieves. Well, they're not born thieves. That's not part of the genetics. If you're a thief and you can't help yourself, you learn to do that. Okay, that's acquired. Yes.
Yeah, I think the problem is in the word critical. Like the first one, critical legal theory. That wasn't the word critical in there because they were proposing something that was criticizing
The word
the
critical
system.
among scholars is a fancy way of saying important.
Oh,
This is critical. Critical studies, critical theory. It's something that's really important. I gotta confess, I'm not in love with the phrase critical race theory.
No.
It's just hard by itself. And one of the things it's done, it's been fairly easy to vilify it because it's not easy to understand. But the concept of underneath are not all that difficult.
it's a bad name.
Yeah, I looked it up.
We're stuck with it. Yes.
So this is my understanding, which, please tell me when I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Thank you. So starting off, well, one thing, the irony is that, from the very beginning, all men are created equal, which seems to be diametrically opposed to the way the history of our country has basically built in, and then you gave some great examples about the cash bail, is that what critical race theory I've heard as examples were that things have been built into our legal system that systematically has kept certain groups with much less opportunity than others because of the way it has been executed, not with the purpose of the original Constitution.
It's not just race, look how long it took for women to be allowed to vote.
Well, and it's
And that's
interesting
what's going
because,
on.
okay,
Yeah.
so my father was an immigrant, and he came with a very strong accent. And at that point in New York City, if you were not Italian or a WASP, you could not get into a union. So my father, very well educated in Ireland, and he screamed, looking Irish, as I do. I just don't happen to have the accent. He could not get a job. I mean, for years, you worked through that because you lived in New York City and you couldn't, and this is the 1920s. My dad was quite old, he was 120 now. And that was because certain groups really wanted to be superior, and what the objection to critical race theory is now is that there are a lot of people who really need to look down on somebody else. And they have maintained gerrymandering and everything else in order for them to keep them down. And that's kind of the way I look at critical race theory. And I think it's right. I think that is the problem, is that there's a lot of things built into our operational systems right now that keep certain groups down, like the cash bail, or the people choosing even though they're innocent, a small jail time, but then what the impact is later on, they'll never be able to get a decent job because they are now a felon.
But of course, the people who are the college professors in law schools don't want that. They think that's as wrong as you do.
Oh, yeah.
There's not proponents of critical race theory that feel that way. It's the opponents of critical race theory.
I'm sorry.
You lost me.
You lost me.
I'm sorry.
You lost me on that last sentence.
Yeah, I'm sure I lost myself. You made it sound like critical race theory is about doing those bad things, and it's not. It's about preventing them. The law school professors.
I think it addresses the systemic problems that exist today.
Yes.
That you want to tell people this has to change.
Right.
Because there's hurting groups.
Yeah.
For no good reason.
And I wouldn't get the idea.
And I'm not saying, right, I'm not against it.
I wouldn't say that this is uniquely a problem in our country. I think you go any place in the world and people are sorted out by a lot of characteristics that are largely irrelevant. Huh?
They don't have guns.
No, some do, but not as many. I agree with that. Yes?
I have another question. I don't know if it's kind of linked to that. What is woke? I don't even understand woke.
Okay, the original meaning of woke, and it was an African American expression or reference during the 1920s and 30s, and it's related to being awake. Woke, I woke up, that kind of woke, and it means pay attention, be aware, especially of anything that's racist or bigoted, because at that point in time, black men in particular were being hung, lynched, and that's what it was about. Watch where you are, watch yourself, look out for people who might wish to harm you or your family. That's where woke came from. That's its origin. Of course, we have politicians that will take any word and twist it into whatever it is that they want.
Scott, did you have a question you heard? I don't have it anymore, but I had a definition of critical race theory, but we pretty much covered it. I think. Yeah. It's just the systemic racism built into laws, policies, procedures that are detrimental to certain groups.
And if you can throw on the word woke, it's becoming aware that they're there. It's all been, this is the way it is.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, maybe it shouldn't be that way.
That's right.
And you had a hand back here, excuse me, did you? No, I was just going to say, and I'm a lawyer, so I understand the theory a little bit, I think, but I think that's right. It's the whole concept that it's systemic. And that it's not that, oh, I'm discriminating against one person. It's not, because a lot of people are, well, I don't discriminate. I'm not racist. I didn't have a slave, so they think they're not racist. And it's not saying that people are racist, it's saying that the system, there's built-in things in the system that create discrepancies in how the races are treated. So to your point, it's a systemic issue. And critical race theory is trying to get people to understand that even if they're not personally discriminatory, there's a systemic problem because of the history of this country and because of the laws and policies.
Systemic.
Could I give one example?
Redlining, back when they would say, oh, blacks can't move into this area. Now, their house values are less, so that's, years of generational wealth that wasn't built up, and it's those kind of concepts. But you're right, the incarceration thing is a big one.
You're all aware of this two-strike rule in Florida?
Yes.
Commit 2 felonies, and you automatically go to prison for the rest of your life. No chance of parole. Now, in other states, they have a 3-strike law. But Florida, when they heard that, they said, we got to be tougher on crime than that, so we'll make it a 2-strike law. Okay. Black Americans make up 15% of the population in Florida, and 75% of the population that are in prison for the rest of their lives for committing 2 felonies. And there was an article in the Tampa Bay Times, maybe a month or 2 ago, about how sometimes the felonies are not even very serious crimes, but they're technically felonies, and the judges have no choice but to send people away for the rest of their lives. It really is. And it's enormously expensive, enormously expensive.
Yeah.
The United States has the highest rate of imprisonment, incarceration in the world.
In the world.
It's expensive to taxpayers, and there's a huge lobby, and they support senators and congressmen and so forth with their, they provide money to them, and of course, we want to get tough on crime. And the way to prove that is by throwing more and more people in jail. Yes, ma'am.
No, I was just going to say, as a retired school teacher, elementary school teacher, I ended up teaching 6th grade science for them and language arts. The best time for me was February. We loved Black History Month. I'm telling you, the kids could get along with each other. The books that we read, kids would learn that nobody is white. I mean, this is white.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would say to kids, especially in science, you have short hair. Or not short, you have curly hair. Why do you have curly hair? Why would you want curly hair? Why do you want dimples? You've got a widow's peak. What do you have that for? And they're like, I had no choice, I was born with it. And I would say, exactly. You can't blame people for what they're born with, including the color of their skin. And kids really got it in 6th grade. It's not the kids that believe it, it's the parents. And these parents, I can guarantee you, that are storming into these school boards, are parents that I couldn't get to come into my classroom to sit down and talk to me about the problems with their kids. The one that you say others have to go in and talk, the ones that are very pleased with the school system and get along, talk to the teachers, help the kids, understand what's going on, they're not going in because they don't see anything wrong with what's happening in the schools. And it's sad because children are not born to hate, it's the parents that make them hate.
Well said.
Scott, as a wrap-up, I don't know, did we cover all the questions on the?
We could run through them.
Let's do that and then we'll.
Okay.
We did most of it.
All right.
Percentage.
We did number 1. Black incarceration rate is 581% higher. Not just more people, as a function of the population. Which country has the highest incarceration? Oh, that's the United States. Genetic differences between individuals of any 2 races are about 1%. And critical legal studies argues that laws are partly driven by social biases.
All right, so we should remember not to be swayed by the word critical. We should replace that with important.
Yes,
Theory.
Yeah.
And the theory is the study of something.
Yeah.
So.
Theory is a tricky word too. I don't care much for the titles of these topics.
All right, if you have questions or comments that you'd want to make to Scott, we're going to wrap up soon. We have 2 other things we have to cover, and then we'll be done for this morning. And any of you who say you wanted to go to lunch, we will be doing that. I want to, Mary Schultz, do you real quick want to thank you, Scott? Sure. Thank you.